Here we are in the Visible Body app. We're doing the muscular system this week. We will be learning the differences between skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. I encourage you to watch all of these videos. I'm not going to go slide by slide as we would in the typical lecture because you are not here to pose questions with me. So I'm going to go through, point out a couple of the highlights. I've posted videos in other classes I've been doing online, and let's be honest, nobody watches them. So we're going to keep this as brief as possible, and we're going to trust that this software is sufficient to guide your learning process, and then I will be there to supplement and help you through this. So 3 different types of muscles here: cardiac, skeletal, and smooth. Smooth muscle is going to be what we call fusiform shaped. It looks sharp on both ends with an enlarged body in the middle. Single nucleus. When we get to the skeletal muscle, we see these stripes appear, and we call those striations. Those are from this functional unit that we call the sarcomere. So that's the tiny, tiny, tiny unit of that muscle and what causes its contraction. You'll notice that those striations are also found on the cardiac muscle. So you find striations on cardiac as well as skeletal. Skeletal muscle, a unique thing there is going to be that it is multinucleate. So you'll find nucleus lying all over the perimeter of it. You look at the other 2 options, cardiac and smooth, they are mononucleate or only have 1 nucleus per cell. So if we were to break down a couple of differences, if I said what muscle cell has striations, we're down to 2/3 of the options. We either know that it's cardiac or skeletal. If I say name a muscle cell that is, mononucleate, then we're down to smooth and cardiac. Striated, again, cardiac, skeletal. Fusiform shaped, smooth muscle. Autorhythmic, cardiac. Involuntary, cardiac and smooth. Voluntary, skeletal. So you get the picture. There's ways that we can look at these and figure out differences, and then that changes the behavior of the organ or the region of the body that it's going to affect. Next we have the breakdown, the skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle, showing you where those would be, and then the muscular anatomy, showing you the entire body with its different regions. The nerve and blood supply, we don't have a ton of time to go there. So 14.1 there, you can look at that, but we're basically skipping past that. We do need to know the skeletal muscle function and the overview. That's that sarcomere. So that's the unit that we're going to be examining. So check that video out. That will explain what the sarcomere is. The sarcomere, S-A-R-C-O-M-E-R-E. I highly encourage you to go to YouTube and find a video that instructs you on how to draw a sarcomere. This will help you learn what it is, give you a nice visual in your mind, as well as give you something to reference that you can use to draw out for yourself. I usually encourage people to draw it on their tests, but since you'll be taking those at home, you can just draw it in your notes and use that as a reference to answer any questions about the functional unit of the muscle. Action potentials, that's going to talk about the nerve and sending its action potential down to the muscle, causing that contraction. And then we've got that muscle contraction with the cross bridge formation. So all of this is going back to that sarcomere. Again, if you learn how to draw it, these videos will make sense. So I think I would learn how to draw the sarcomere first. Maybe you'll think differently, but learn how to draw that first. And then innervation is just a fancy word for a nerve attaching to a muscle. So then we've got this brain signal heading down the nerve, heading down the cable, so to speak. When we get to the muscle, then it tells that muscle to perform its action, which is flexion in our instance. The tissue histology, this is showing you the biceps brachii. That biceps brachii we would call a skeletal muscle. You can see here in this diagram, we see the skeletal muscle. That's the large portion there. We can break this down into 3 and 4 other functional units. So we take that skeletal muscle, and if you look there are a bunch of smaller functional units within that, and we call those fascicles. So that fascicle is sticking out of that skeletal muscle. You follow that fascicle up, and you'll notice that that fascicle then divides into even more small units. And we call that a muscle fiber, or you might call it a muscle cell. Out of that muscle fiber, Then you have the myofibril, and that myofibril, is going to be the muscle fiber. Inside of that muscle fiber, that muscle cell, I'm getting my words mixed up. So we've got muscle, skeletal muscle, then muscle fiber, then down to myofibril. That myofibril is the skeletal muscle cell. And then we break that further down, and inside of that cell, we have a thin filament and a thick filament. These are both a part of that sarcomere, that functional unit, the contractile unit. We've got them labeled as actin and myosin. Those are their actual names. A cute way to remember that is that the actin is thin, so actin, and the thick filament is myosin, which is just the opposite. Here's what they look like under microscope. We would have a chance to look at these in the lab. Honestly, this is easier and just as beneficial. You can see the striations, you can see the nuclei and multi-nucleate, right? So we can see nuclei all around the periphery. And here's some more skeletal muscle and skeletal muscle. It's just really zoomed in. You see the nuclei, you can see the light band, dark band, thick filament, thin filament are all going to be a part of this. Once you learn how to draw the sarcomere, those pictures will make quite a bit more sense. Next, we've got chapter 15. This is going to show you the difference between smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. We've already established skeletal muscle, so this is going to show you the smooth muscle function, which smooth muscle is the strongest muscle in the body. It's very, very strong and can contract for a long period of time without exhaustion. Skeletal muscle, it's very quick, but it is very weak in comparison. So basically we want you to get a grasp of where you would find these. Smooth muscle we're going to find in systems that we don't think about, mostly lining tubes. Really, you're going to be lining tubes called blood vessels, tubes called trachea and bronchi, tubes called a stomach or an esophagus, the alimentary canal, which would be your large intestine, your small intestine. So we're going to line those tubes, and we do a thing called peristalsis, which is contracting from the top and working our way, contracting all the way down through that canal, the alimentary canal, and that's how we move things through the digestive tract. Cardiac muscle, autorhythmic, found in one place and one place only, and that would be the heart. Autorhythmic, so we send a nerve impulse down to the heart, and when it hits one cell, that cell then carries that message on to the next cell, to the next cell, to the next cell, so on and so forth. We'll learn more about the smooth muscle and cardiac muscle when we get to those specific chapters. So when we get to the urinary system, we will learn about the smooth muscle's involvement. When we get to the cardiac, to the heart, we'll learn about the cardiac muscle and its function and the way that it behaves and all that fun stuff. Next, we've got chapter 16. This is the heaviest chapter here. So you can see chapter 16 goes on for quite a while. Now, most of this is going to be stuff that you can just set aside or look at it for your own good. But where I would encourage you to go to is your structure list. So when you go to your structure list, let me see if I can pull it up quick enough. Probably about page 16. My computer's dead. So I think it's about page 16. You'll pull up your structure list. That structure list is going to have an Excel spreadsheet format deal where it's going to say, on the far left, it's going to say the muscle, and we're going to have origin, insertion, and action. And this is very, very, very abbreviated. There are over 600 muscles in the body. We are going to fit in 30 to 40 over the next week. So very, very abbreviated, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. So spend a lot of time on this. And instead of going through each one of these sections here in chapter 16, I would encourage you to isolate the ones that are important to you. So the extrinsic eye muscles, I believe those are on there. Take a look at those, look at the 3D model, get familiar with the lateral rectus, the medial rectus, superior rectus, inferior. You get the point. So you can go in and highlight these and be able to quiz yourself, but again, only do the ones that apply. So try to go through here and just isolate. A lot of these I'm skipping past them because we just don't have time. We don't have time for 600 muscles. The abdomen, of course, we're going to do the abdomen. It's super, super important, and it's something that everybody's aware of, so it'd be silly for us to not know that. We'll know a little bit about the pelvis, a little bit about breathing, so I'd encourage you to look at that. And then we're going to need to know origin and insertion. So that will be part of the process. I'm going to come back up to the top because I think they've got a section on this. So skeletal muscle attachments. Basically what we're looking at here with a skeletal muscle is we have an origin and an insertion. Now the origin, I would say that that is most similar to asking somebody where they were born. That's something that's not going to move. You might say, where are you from? And if you've lived somewhere else longer than where you were born, then you would say the other place and not the place you were born. So if you stick with where you're born, that really doesn't change. And that's how we go here. We've got the biceps brachii here, and the origin, you can see there, is on the, well, you can't quite see it, but it's going to be on the scapula there, and they kind of block it off. But the scapula is the non-moving bone. That's the point I'm trying to drive home here. The insertion will be on the moving bone. So in order for that bicep to contract, that shoulder does not need to move. Only the radius and the ulna move. And so where's the insertion? That's going to be on the radius down there. So we're going to origin not move, insertion moves, and that will be a good way to help you remember that. Otherwise, if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer emails or text messages, and we will continue on. When you get to the quizzes, I've looked at those quizzes, and I don't have full control over the content in there until we get to the final exam. So these quizzes will have a couple of questions that are from these sections that you aren't going to spend a lot of time in. So work with me on that. Take those questions and just learn them. Get the questions right or get them wrong. You're graded for participation on these quizzes, not on perfection. Obviously, I could tell if you were just going in and fat fingering it and getting, your quizzes done in 1 minute and 0 questions right. But I'll understand if the ones that you're missing aren't a part of our structure list. That would make perfect sense to me and is totally acceptable. So in the multiple choice and the dissection, there will be questions that don't pertain. Just work with me on that. That's all I ask, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.